What do you think is the best way to discover ancient ruins? Using fancy scanning machines from thousands of feet up in the air. While that does sound like a great idea and has worked well for archaeologists in the past, it's not always the case. In fact, some ruins are right there in plain sight, but so well hidden that they remain undiscovered even today. Take this underwater discovery, for example. A researcher stumbled upon an underwater alignment while surveying the ocean floor. But when he went down to investigate further, he was in for the shock of his life. Join us as we talk about stone lines and sea monsters, the mystery of the underwater alignments. It all started in 1998. At the time, Paul Hepler was a doctoral candidate at the University of Texas. His specialty was nautical archaeology. He was interested in shipwrecks, the remains of docks, old seawalls, and other human-made structures lying beneath the Caribbean waters. And his expertise would lead to a discovery that left experts scratching their heads. Hepler had been hired by the government of Belize to map the country's waters. He was tasked with creating a detailed picture of what lay beneath the surface. Back then, high-tech scanning machines were just starting to be used to study the seabed. They consisted of sonar systems mounted on airplanes. These planes would fly low over the water, dragging a device called a sub-bottom profiler along the shoreline. This device sent out sound waves into the ocean, that bounced back after hitting an object or layer, and were recorded by the machine. By calculating how long it took for the waves to come back, the researchers could tell how deep an object was. And by comparing different sound wave frequencies, they could also tell the density and composition of whatever they had found. Using this technology, Hepler noticed something strange off the coast of the small island of Ambergris Cay. It was a perfectly straight line running across the ocean floor. It was artificial, that much was clear. But who built it, and why? Nobody knew. Hepler wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery, literally. So he packed his scuba gear and headed into the water. He dove down and swam out to the line, expecting to see something similar to a seawall. What he actually found was so bizarre that he almost thought he was dreaming. The line wasn't a wall, not even close. It was a series of large stones, almost like a path made of giant stepping stones, stretching as far as he could see. Each monolith was around 4 feet wide and averaged 2 to 3 feet above the seafloor. There were no visible markings on them, and their edges were worn smooth by years of erosion. What made things stranger was that these stones seemed to fit together like a puzzle. The spaces between them were uniformly narrow, and the stones themselves were all aligned in the same direction facing east. And as if this wasn't enough, Hepler saw something that made his eyes pop out of his head. The stones continued under the sand. In some places, the tops of the monoliths were covered with sand, leaving only their bases visible. In others, the entire structures were completely buried except for a few pebbles that peeked out. It was beyond anything he'd ever seen before. Was this the work of some ancient civilization? Had he just discovered the remains of a dock or breakwater? Or was there something else going on here? As he explored further, he found more answers than questions. For one thing, he found ceramic fragments. They came from old bottles dating back to the 18th century. Could this mean that the stone line was part of a colonial dock? Perhaps a structure used to unload cargo from ships centuries ago. But Hepler soon realized that this theory didn't hold up. The pottery he'd found was rum family, a type of ceramic made only in England. So if the stones were indeed part of a man-made structure, they couldn't have been built by the British. Rum family pottery wasn't available in the New World until the 1970s. He was stumped. With no historical records mentioning the stone line, he didn't know where to start his investigation. Then he got lucky. He met an old fisherman named Joe Waite, who told him a local legend. According to what he said, the islanders believed the line was the work of a mythical sea monster. Legend said that a giant serpent-like creature lived in the nearby waters. It had a human-like face and was so big that its scales were visible from miles away. One day it crawled onto the shore and created the stone line as a pathway for itself. When the monster was done, it returned to the sea and never came back. While this story may sound far-fetched, it helped Hepler narrow down the possibilities. If the stone line was natural, then what force could have created such an unusual structure? It needed to be something powerful enough to move large rocks, yet precise enough to fit them together like a jigsaw. Kepler thought back to the fisherman's tale. Could the legendary sea monster have been real? And if so, could it somehow be responsible for the stone line? To find out, he needed to go deeper. He invited marine geologist Ian Smith to join him on a second expedition. Together, they conducted side-scan sonar surveys and found that the alignments extended much farther than they had originally thought. They even discovered another set of stones arranged in the same direction parallel to the first. Kepler and Smith dove down again and found more clues. They saw grooves and ridges on some of the stones. At first, they thought it might be erosion marks, but under closer inspection, they realized the markings were too uniform. There were 14 lines running across each stone, perfectly spaced and identical in size. Whatever had created them had done so with incredible precision. It was a total mystery. To make matters worse, they were about to lose their only access to the site. The government of Belize had decided to build a highway near the coast. Construction would destroy the only road leading to the sea. Kepler and Smith knew they had to act fast. Before they lost access to the site, they brought in a team of experts. Archaeologists, geologists, and anthropologists joined them to try and solve the puzzle. But even with more hands on deck, they were still clueless. The site became known as the Belize Barrier Reef. Second line. Barrier Reef because of its proximity to the world's second largest barrier reef, and alignments because of the strange stone formations. But without any answers, the research stalled. It wasn't until a decade later that the alignments would get the attention they deserved. In 2008, the late explorer Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the wreck of the Titanic, visited the site. Ballard was intrigued by the mystery of the stone line, and he used his experience and resources to uncover new clues. His team brought in a magnetometer. This instrument measures magnetic variations in the Earth. They hoped that it might help them identify buried parts of the structure, but what they found surprised them. The readings showed that the alignments were magnetic anomalies in themselves. Each rock monolith had a unique magnetic signature, meaning they were naturally magnetic. But why? As it turned out, the answer was right under their noses, or should we say fins. One of the researchers, marine biologist Andrew Egas, noticed that the stones closely resembled the vertebrae of a large fish. As a shark expert, he suspected that the sea monster from local legend was actually a giant stingray. To test this theory, he examined the shapes of the rocks. Sure enough, they matched the vertebrae of a stingray. Each rock monolith was a single bone from the giant's skeleton. So the question was, did a giant stingray really create the stone line? If so, how could a fish build such a precise structure? Well, according to Eos, he wasn't actually building anything. The truth is that the bones probably didn't come from a single animal. Instead, they were collected by ocean currents and deposited in layers over hundreds or even thousands of years. Over time, they were eroded into their present forms and lined up by natural forces. Basically, Mother Nature played a trick on them. She created something so unusual that people long ago thought it was the work of a sea monster. Today, the stone line is still a mystery, though. Some researchers believe it is proof of a giant prehistoric stingray, while others argue that it's just a collection of rocks. The truth is, we may never know for sure. But one thing is certain, the alignments are one of the most unusual underwater discoveries ever made. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll find more evidence that will finally solve the mystery. Until then, the stone line will continue to baffle scientists and amaze anyone who sees it. And if you want to hear more fascinating stories about mysterious underwater discoveries, stay tuned for more updates. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.